Thanks for listening to the Swearing In podcast, where you'll hear the origin stories of those who chose to serve. So ground your gear, take a seat, and listen up. The Swearing In podcast starts right now.
Forgot to do my ORM, now I'm going home.
Forgot to do my ORM, and now I'm going home.
Oh Lord, I wanna stay.
Oh Lord, I wanna stay.
Big Navy says no way.
Big Navy says no way.
Oh, hey.
Oh, hey.
Hello and welcome to everyone listening, and a hearty hooah to all of my brothers and sisters in service. This is the Swearing In Podcast, and I am your host, Marty Smith. Today, my guest is Navy Commander retired Lem Shepherd. Lem graduated high school in Newport, Rhode Island in 1972. He attended the University of California at San Diego, where he graduated with a psychology degree in 1976. After speaking with a Navy recruiter, he decided to join the service, and in October 1976, he swore in. Lem attended Officer Candidate School at Newport, Rhode Island, followed by Surface Warfare Officer School at San Diego, California. His first assignment was aboard the aircraft carrier USS Ranger. His next ship was the oil tanker USNS Kawishiwi, an assignment to Yokosuka, Japan, followed by shore duty back at San Diego. In 1986, he left the active Navy and joined the Naval Reserves. After several different reserve assignments, he deployed to Kuwait in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom. He retired from the Navy in 2004. This concludes your readiness brief on Commander Shepherd. Now let's get on with the interview. Hey, Lem, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. How me, over?
Yep, 5 by 5, as the old people used to say. Where'd you grow up at?
You know, my dad was in the Marine Corps, and he retired. By the time he retired out of the Marine Corps, I had just started college. Consequently, as I grew up, it was mainly on Marine Corps stations from Camp.
Kidding.
I still say Camp Lejeune to Camp Pendleton to Kaneohe.
Wow.
Yeah, he had his time at the Pentagon. We moved. So people ask me like, oh, where are you from, Lem? Well, I have to answer honestly, because my dad was in the Marine Corps for the first 20 some years of my life. We moved all over the United States.
That's fair.
And which had a big influence on me.
Where did you graduate from high school then, ultimately?
Ironically, I New England, it was cold up there, and that was kind of a weird place. But my dad, one of his assignments was at the, even though he's in the Marines, it was at the Naval War College in Newport, Rhode Island. And consequently, during that time period, that's where I ended up graduating from high school.
Did you graduate in 76?
No, actually, I graduated in close. I graduated in 1972. You know something? I'm going to be very candid with you here. I went following high school graduation. I went to college, and then I ended up getting a commission.
Oh yeah, that's fine. Yeah. Did you go ROTC?
Well, so here's the interest. This is the ironic thing, and I keep my sense of humor. So after I graduated from college, kind of a long story, I ended up going back to I call it Officer Boot Camp, which was Officer Candidate School, OCS, believe it or not, Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know. It was the middle of a record-breaking cold winter, and we marched around outside, and it sucked. And I put in turned out to be 6 months at OCS in Newport, Rhode Island. And ironically, I didn't have a chance to visit any of my old high schooler haunts there.
No, they wouldn't let you out to go do that.
Basically, yeah, we were stuck on base. I don't know if it was as tough as boot camp, but it sucked, and I was glad to pack my bags. And actually, I don't think I've ever been back there, nor have a my high school had its reunion, the 50th reunion not long ago, and I just said thanks, but no thanks. I had no desire really. I think Newport kind of, OCS left a bad taste in my mouth.
You graduate from Newport High School in 1972, and you were straight off to college, or what was your plans then?
I was actually. My dad was still in the Marine Corps, and
what rank was your father at that time?
Yeah, my dad, he retired as a colonel. I will digress for just a second, though, Marty, because this is an impact on my life. My father's father was in the Marine Corps, and actually my mother's father was in the Navy. So in that sense, there was a family tradition of serving in the military. So those definitely had an influence on me.
Wow. So he was a colonel. Did he do his time over in Vietnam?
Indeed, he did. Yeah, he kind of joined as a 17-year-old the Marine Corps during World War II.
Jeez.
I know. I didn't see much action, but he was on the ground, saw action in both the Korean War and the war in Vietnam.
Wow.
So he had a 30-year career in the Marine Corps, and again, that had a huge. He was a role model, and I looked up to him. So actually, here's an ironic thing: because he was such a gung-ho Marine, I never felt I could really follow in his footsteps, and consequently, it was like, man, I don't, if I would be overshadowed by my father and even my grandfather if I joined the Marines. Consequently, I ended up joining the Navy.
How did that come about?
Ironically, Marty, so the spring of my senior year, as graduation was approaching, my dad said, okay, you're going to have to get a job and make your way in the world. This was spring of my senior year, and it's like, I'm not sure what kind of job I can find. And
was the draft still going?
It was just ending.
Okay.
So it switched over from the draft to all volunteer. And I think that was about 1976. I'd have to double check. But it was around that time period when they did away with the draft and went to the all voluntary military. So although I think I got some sort of a draft number, they were not breathing down my neck. As a matter of fact, the Vietnam War at that point was essentially over, although the military was still a unpopular profession.
Right. Okay, I'm sorry. I short-circuited your story there. So you're going to have to go out and get a job.
That's right. So it's like, okay, Lem, so what you going to do to earn a living? It just so happened, I think I saw it in our college newspaper. It was like, military Navy recruiters will be on base. Will be on campus. Conducting interviews, next week. And if you want to sit down with the Navy recruiters on campus, you can set up an interview. And so again, I was kind of lost and didn't have the military, quite honestly, Marty, had maybe subconsciously I was leaning in that direction, but I did not have a burning desire to join the Navy or anything.
That's fair. Yeah, sure. Even with your father, your grandfather and all that, they didn't put any pressure to go, hey, go into the military.
Yeah, in that way I was blessed. They didn't even kind of say, oh, you should go to the Naval Academy or VMI. Or even a ROTC. I got to give them a lot of credit. They did not put a pressure on me, during high school to like, oh, you got to, get a ROTC scholarship, or I didn't even apply. I don't think I could have gotten into any of the academies, quite honestly.
Were you a good high school student?
Fair, actually.
Okay.
Fair. It would have been interesting. It didn't really even occur to me, Marty. I was rebellious and wanted to have long hair and
Really?
During the 70s there was still a lot of anti-military because of the Vietnam War sentiment, and it was like, man, who would want to go to West Point or the Academy? And again, I don't think academically I could have gotten in, quite honestly.
Yeah. No, it's summer of love, right?
Yeah, well, that's right. It was like, let your hair grow. And not only that, but women. I was anxious to sow my wild oats and enjoy my 4 years in college.
So the recruiter, did you go talk to him when they came?
Yeah, we had a good sit down. He was a wonderful guy. And it was like, yeah, I think we can get you in. Again, I think part of that was because of the holdover from the Vietnam War era. The military was not real popular, so it was not as selective, quite honestly.
Yeah.
Both enlisted and officers. It was kind of like, oh, okay, you got decent grades. Actually, I'm going to digress for one point. I don't know if I made an error. But there was the question arose like, Lem, have you ever smoked marijuana? And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I had. It was like I did jump through a bunch of hoops and say, it was only under experimental. I only did it 2 or 3 times, and it was for social experimentation, and I had to get a big waiver from the senior captain or some such thing.
Wow.
And I thought, man, all my classmates smoke dope all the time. And here, and actually then I went to OCS and I started talking to some of my fellow candidates at OCS, and they all said, oh, well, of course we smoke dope, but we didn't mention it to the recruiter. Were you crazy?
I think I said experimental use as well. So that must be the key phrase.
That's right. It was the key phrase. You experimented under social circumstances or some such.
Yes.
Okay, we'll give you a one-time pass on that experience.
Okay, so you're finishing up at school when the recruiters are coming. Is that what you're saying?
it was my senior year, and I didn't have. It was not like, I don't know what other companies I might have interviewed. Some of the companies come on campus and they sit down and interview, but I was kind of a lost sheep, and I got excited actually about the Navy and returning to Newport. Ironically, I had fairly pleasant memories from my time at high school up there, and I thought, wouldn't that be cool? And it was kind of neat. So I can go back to Newport, Rhode Island for 6 months. But little did I know what I was getting into.
What university did you go to?
My dad retired out of the Marine Corps and moved to San Diego, ironically. And I graduated from University of California at San Diego, so UCSD. Nowadays, it's a very competitive, academically demanding college, and my grades were okay. But again, things have gotten so super competitive. I'm not sure I could have gotten in there nowadays.
What was your major?
So to be honest with you, that was another thing that led me to going into the Navy. I majored in psychology, which
psychology brother. I was a psychology major as well.
Well, I found it a fascinating subject, and I was interested as I was in college. It's like, this is a neat subject. Plus, there were a lot of women.
Yes, there was.
So again, it's like, psychology. Little did I think about, and what are you going to do with the degree in psychology?
Well, you're supposed to go get a major in psychology, right?
Well, that's right. And I did, but I did not pursue graduate school at all. So it was like, it wasn't like a double E or some, some useful degree.
So the recruiters come. Why'd you decide on the Navy?
Well, again, my dad and my grandfather were very successful Marine Corps officers.
Yeah.
And I felt overshadowed and intimidated by their successful careers. And again, if I had joined the Marine Corps, actually, I have a cousin who's my age who joined the Marine Corps. And, based on his experience, it's like, man, you're how come you're not as good a Marine as your father and your grandfather were?
Sure.
And so I didn't want to kind of be overshadowed. Oh, by the way, Marty, I have the exact same name, Lemuel Shepherd, which is a little unusual. And it's like, oh, yeah, I served with your father or some such thing.
Oh, yeah.
So I wanted to slightly deviate on my path.
What about Army or Air Force? That wasn't an option?
Nah, I don't know. I just didn't really consider them. Actually, spending college in the San Diego area, which is a huge.
Oh yeah, it's all Navy.
Day, it's a big Navy town still. Right. So I was greatly influenced by that.
Yeah, easy enough. So you graduate in 76.
76.
They come and say, "Hey, you're going to go to OCS, right?"
Yeah, Newport, Rhode Island. You go, little did I know when I was extremely naive. I didn't know what the heck I was getting into. I didn't even know. I ended up becoming what they call, and I'm very proud of it, a surface warfare officer, which is AKA a ship driver, which I'm extremely proud of to this day. But I kind of considered submarines, which again, back in those days of Rickover and stuff, was extremely competitive, and I didn't have the grades and the physics classes to really go underwater on a sub, and I didn't have the eyesight. When I talked to the Navy recruiter, he's like, "Oh, you got to have like 20/20 vision, and no way you can become an aviator."
Well, they weren't nuclear yet, were they?
Oh yeah. The nukes were there, and in those bad old days, Admiral Rickover personally interviewed all the potential submarine officers, and I don't know if you heard stories, but he gave brutal interviews. And again, I don't think I would have made it through it.
How was your first day of OCS then?
Yeah, that was a shock. The same thing, the haircut, and it was a shock to my liberal inexperience.
Oh yeah.
And so I'll tell you what, especially the first week or two, Marty, and I think they do it intentionally, just kind of was such a shock to my system. As a matter of fact, the guy that I shared a bunk with, right next to me, he rolled out of there. I think it was 2 or 3 days. You could voluntarily. I think as a matter of fact, after a certain point, you had to pay him back and become enlisted. However, the first week or so, it's like, hey, if you don't want to make the Navy a career, go just not ring the bell, but just tell them you want out of here.
Sure.
And so I was kind of like on my own, and my roommate, who was a smart dude, said, "Hey, this is ridiculous. No way I'm going to put up with this." And he was out of there like about 2 days later.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, that was kind of shocking to my system, because he was my morale boost, and when he dropped out, it was a shock again.
Sure, and no real phones to call home or anything like that. Not that your dad would have really wanted to hear that phone call, but
yeah, I'll tell you what, it again, psychologically, and I know they do it intentionally, boot camp and stuff, to actually to get rid of, screen the people. If you can't handle, boot camp or OCS, then you're not going to make it through 4 years.
Yeah.
And so they intentionally try to screen the people who are not dedicated and motivated enough to intentionally drop out. And so it was very demanding, and I really had to make up my mind that, yep, I'm going to stick with it.
Okay. All right. That the job surface warfare officer, was that something you negotiated with, or did they just give you that?
No, it was kind of the default. I mean, there were some at officer candidate school. Actually, the aviators, I think they go to Pensacola, AOCS, they call it.
Oh.
But up in Newport, I don't know if it's that way even today, but we had submarine guys, we had SEALs, We had supply
wow.
officers, and we had a couple other cats and dogs. But the majority of folks were, we say, surface line, mighty fine. And it's like, yep, stand by. If you can make it through OCS, you'll be assigned to a ship, and that's your career path.
Geez, you got to go during the cold part of the year, didn't you?
Yeah, I don't, we used to tell ourselves, it was a record-breaking cold winter with lots of snow in Newport, and it was damn cold. So that was kind of that's my memory, Marty, is kind of like, man, cold days, marching around outside in formation, in the snow. And it was just pretty much a miserable time. And again, I think they make it that way intentionally.
Sure.
To, if you're not motivated enough and committed enough to make it through, then they didn't want you. So that was the purpose.
At the end of OCS, is that when you get commissioned?
Yes. So on the final day of OCS, they have a ceremony. It's kind of not quite like the Naval Academy, but, you get pinned, they promote you to ensign, you switch from, the 6 months at OCS, you're enlisted, and then you get, you hold up your right hand. And actually, I don't think they trusted us to throw our hard white hats in the air, but we held our hands up and got sworn in as ensigns, kind of the lowest of the low at the end of OCS.
Now, did you go off to a specialty school? I'm asking because I'm a little naive for the officer path.
No, exactly. And that's why I kind of wanted to make it a little more interesting for some of your listeners. Yeah, so they did send me, there's a pipeline, it's like, okay, you're a surface warfare officer. I got to admit, they did, after you get commissioned, it gets a little easier in that they want to keep you in now. Yeah, however, right. It was still very demanding, and the pipeline to become an officer on a ship was still pretty rigorous. And actually, they sent me, ironically, to San Diego, and that I'm trying to think the name of the school there, but that was pretty demanding even there. So although I got out of the frying pan up in Newport, Rhode Island, just as it was starting to warm up, and they sent me to San Diego to the school there, and that was pretty rigorous also.
Back to San Diego. Jeez, Rhode Island to back to San Diego.
Yeah, actually, so that was a good thing. I'll tell you what, there was a little less pressure in that I had gotten commissioned, but that was pretty demanding. The Surface Warfare Officer, SWO, they pronounce it, Surface Warfare Officer School in San Diego. But I was definitely in the pipeline by that point.
Okay. How long was that school?
That school was about 3 or 4 months. You became what they call a ship driver, and that's where they really teach you ship handling and how to fight a ship. Interestingly enough, so you go through this Surface Warfare Officer School with people who graduated from the Naval Academy and ROTC. And one of the interesting things, Marty, for whatever reason, the OCS people, which is where I got my commission, did just as well or better, surprisingly, than the Naval Academy and even the ROTC. And people said, it's because OCS, it was fresh in your mind and it was kind of a compressed time. But the folks from OCS, which was pretty selective, did just as well at surface warfare as the Navy Academy and ROTC folks.
I was an ROTC guy, and doing it, kind of once a week over the 4 years is not the same as doing, several months right in a row. So
that was the theory, that it was very compressed and it was fresh in our mind. And that's why we did just as well as the ROTC folks.
I think so. It's just all the academy guys get their choice of assignments, where ROTC and OCS got to suck up whatever's left.
Exactly. We kind of get the leftovers, the bottom of the bag after all the good ships and home ports and jobs are taken. It's like, what do we have left over for these OCS folks? We'll give them kind of the last choices of where to go.
So you graduate SWO school.
Yeah.
And you're off to your first assignment, which is where?
Yeah, actually, I was pretty excited. I did get lucky in that regard. It was kind of a mixed blessing. And again, OCS folks got kind of the last choices as far as ship type and home port. But I was I don't know if it was my ranking or not, or it was probably just luck.
Wait, before you say that, did you have to make a list? Are there two separate lists? Are there one list for ship type and then one list for postings?
Yes. So there's three variables that they look at. So you put down your three. There's three areas, and you put your choices. First off is ship type. Second off is I'll say port. Okay. where the ship is out of, and third is your job on that ship. So they look at those three things. And again, you're competing against Naval Academy and ROTC folks, and it's kind of, you get the bottom choices. But I got kind of lucky, I got to admit, in that I got two of the three, or maybe even three of my choices, Marty. I did want home port of San Diego, which I got. Ship type, not so much. I ended up on, which in hindsight, I don't know, turned out to be okay. I ended up on an aircraft carrier, which for a surface warfare officer is not necessarily the best ship type. But I did get an interesting billet that I was interested in, and that was operations on the aircraft carrier out of San Diego. So in that regard, I got pretty lucky.
What was just curious, do you remember what your top choice? San Diego obviously was your top choice or location. How about what was your top choice of ship?
Yeah, so career-wise, they always said get on a small surface combatant. So supposedly, to do well in the Navy, your first ship should be preferably a destroyer. Maybe a frigate, maybe a cruiser, but a small surface combatant, because you have higher visibility and you get more time in front of the captain. So, I think I did put my first ship type choice as, I'll say, a destroyer. Aircraft carriers are not, for surface warfare officers, are not a good first ship. And actually, as far as our surface warfare officers, that can be a career killer.
Really?
Yeah. Because you got thousands of sailors and I don't know, at least hundreds of officers. Yeah. And, it just, it's like, oh, man, you're supposed to be a ship driver. Why'd they put you on an aircraft carrier?
Oh, jeez.
Yeah.
So, you kind of get lost in the city that is an aircraft carrier, I guess. Right?
Indeed, it is. It's a floating city, Marty.
What aircraft carrier did you go to?
Yeah, it was a pretty modern one at the time. It's now what we call razor blades. It was the aircraft carrier Ranger, and it did have a memorable history. It was a good ship. I'll tell you what. I have no misgivings. It had its problems. All ships do. Yeah. But it was a good ship. We spent a whole lot of time at sea. These were times in the late 70s. That's when the country of Iran switched over. The Ayatollah took over, and consequently, that the Iran-Iraq war was going on, and the ships, including aircraft carriers, would spend many months deployed up near the Persian Gulf, kind of, they call it Gonzo Station, right off the Straits of Hormuz, and just steaming in circles for many months at a time.
So 78 is when they took the hostages?
Yeah, so it was about that time period. When,
were you out at sea?
You know what was ironic, Marty? When I went through OCS, we actually had Iranian naval officer candidates in our OCS class. I don't know whatever happened to them, but it was early in my career, sadly, when The Shah got overthrown.
That's right.
The Ayatollah Khomeini took over. He started holding the hostages from our embassy, and that was a sad, difficult time. And the ships were deploying for over 6 months, and they spent a whole lot of that time out at sea.
Where were you at when they did that? When you got the news of the hostages?
I can't really recall exactly at all. It's a bit of a blur. I was on my first ship, and the ship started deploying. They'd get underway from San Diego. They'd steam all the way. They'd steam, to the Indian Ocean, which is a long ways from San Diego, and then they would stay on station. And again, it was because of the Iran-Iraq war and the hostages, etc. And the Navy was stretched extremely thin as far as ship numbers, and deployment lengths were really long. And it was kind of burning people out. That was the other downside.
Wow. I bet. Yeah.
Yeah. Spending six to 9 months straight at sea. And unfortunately that it's kind of getting back to that. But it was just kind of burning people out.
Not good for retention.
Exactly.
So since the majority of people I talk to on this podcast is Air Force and Army, and this may not be what you were prepared to talk about, but take me into the life of an ensign on an aircraft carrier. I mean, you got your berth. You're not hot bunking it, right? Because you're an officer.
Correct. So the enlisted guys live very tight quarters. They have triple layer racks. They call them bunks. The officers lived in a 6-man stateroom. So as a junior officer, as an ensign, it was a 6-man stateroom. We had double layer bunks, and that there were 2 racks in one above each other. It was it was much better by far than the enlisted folks. However, it was extremely hot. Our compartment was directly above the engineering spaces, and being in the Indian Ocean, it was extremely hot and humid. You put in very long hours, which you stood watches on the bridge, and it could get just physically exhausting. And you worked 7 days a week. 24 hours a day. They tried to give you time off on Sundays, but it was demanding mentally and physically, for everyone on board, officers and enlisted. I don't know how it compares to the environment today, but during that time, it just wears you down, just standing watches, around the clock.
Well, for the hippie Lem Shepherd, who was trying to sow his wild oats, he sure went as far on the opposite side of that as you could go, being on an aircraft carrier full of 6 guys in your room and sweating in the Indian Ocean and pulling 7 days worth of shifts. God, that had to be tough.
Yeah, it was, man. Boy, you put your finger right on it, Marty. You're reading that one right. I didn't. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. So it was a culture shock. Luckily the other folks, all of us were in the same situation. We were shipmates.
Yeah,
we gave ourselves, morale support, but all of us, it was kind of a shock. Not just kind of, it was. Little did we know, any of us, what we were getting into. But between, the shipmates and looking out for each other, that's the kind of takeaway, just as in all military branches. It's your shipmates that you look out for that keep you going.
What were your duties there as, a 23-year-old ensign?
Well, good questions. I did do what they call ship driving, which I'm proud of, in that I was on the bridge and became a officer of the deck, and would actually control the ship as the representative of the captain, who was almost always on the bridge continuously. But again,
that's got to make it clinch up a little bit the first time you go you go do that, right?
Yeah, it is. It's kind of scary because you have the fear of a collision at sea.
Sure.
And that's a real, believe it, that's a real fear. And there are ships that run into each other and run aground, and bad things can happen. So standing the watches on the bridge, that was almost like a collateral duty. I was what they call a division officer, and actually had quite a few enlisted personnel that I was nominally in charge of. However, the beauty of it was there were so many layers of senior enlisted personnel.
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah, so those are the guys really. So I may have been the quote unquote division officer, that kind of ran things, but quite honestly, it was the senior, E7, E8, and E9 that really ran things in my division.
In the Army, when you're commissioned, they throw you right on out there, right? And you're a second lieutenant dealing with E6s and E7s. I had many a times where they pulled me aside and said, "Hey, you're not doing this right. Here's what you need to do." Much to my own chagrin and my own, the sting to your own ego.
Yeah.
But you take that with a grain of salt and you learn how to deal with the enlisted. You learn how to kind of make your way through this military career. Did you have any of those moments?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Thank God. Actually, I had some wonderful, I'll call them chiefs. They were mainly the E7 personnel who looked out for me. As a matter of fact, I think technically one of their jobs is to kind of mentor the very junior 01, 02 officers. And they did. Yeah. They kept my ass out of trouble. And, they would discreetly, let me know when there were problems or I was not doing my job correctly.
Well, and it's tough to hear when you're that young, but at the same time, you're like, I better listen to these guys because they've been doing it for a while and I need them to be successful.
Absolutely. No, I depended on them, and it was a beautiful relationship, quite honestly. And I look back, those are the guys that kept me out of trouble. The very junior enlisted guys, and heavens knows they, I'm sure, just like in the Army and all the branches, those guys can manage to get in all kinds of trouble. But you got that kind of those layers of the more senior enlisted people who, would look out both for the junior officers and their own men.
How long was your tour on the Ranger?
Yeah, I was on the Ranger about 3 years, and I'll tell you what, that was a tough 3 years, but I made it through that. And so that was my first ship. My second ship, it was kind of weird. I did well on the Ranger, the aircraft carrier, and then I was put on a oil tanker. Actually, I was the only.
What?
I know. It was a weird thing, and especially if you're not in the Navy, you do say Whiskey Tango Foxtrot. It's a weird thing. It was what they call a USNS ship, and 90% of the crew on this oil tanker were civilian merchant mariners. However, they had what they call a military detachment or department on board these oil tankers that consisted of about 20 men. They were all men during my time. Now it's obviously men and women, but you have a 20-person military department that are in charge of all basically communications and electronic equipment on board the oil tanker.
Fascinating. Were you Lieutenant JG at this time?
Actually, I had made lieutenant, so this was I think it was at about the 3 to 4 year point, something like that. They have the same flow points in all the branches. So 2 years as an ensign, 2 years, just as you say, as a Lieutenant JG, and then so it was basically the 3 or 4 year point. So I was a lieutenant, kind of full of myself, but again, this oil tanker, that was a pretty demanding job too, believe it or not.
Were you the highest ranking?
I was the only officer on
wow.
board the oil tanker. So that gave me I was what they call a officer in charge, and I did have I had 20 enlisted guys that worked for me, and I was kind of my own boss. Although the senior, they don't like to use this word, but the master of the ship, the captain, he was also a merchant mariner, but he and the other merchant marines drove the ship, and
Wow.
I just handled communications and the military equipment on board.
Oh, okay. Do you remember the name of it?
Oh yeah, it was the U.S. This one is probably razor blades now too, but it was all the oil tankers were named after American Indian rivers, and this was the USNS Kawishiwi. If any of your naval listeners, they all know that the oil tanker replenishment ships, they all have Indian river names, and mine was the USNS Kawishiwi.
So what did you guys shuttle oil back and forth? Or
yeah, so that was what the Kawishiwi did. Usually on a Friday afternoon, we would pull into port, go to the refueling pier. They would pump in oil from huge oil tanks on shore. They fill the ballast of the oil tanker, and our depth would increase. And then usually Sunday night we would get underway and we would go offshore, and all we do, we put in some long, hard hours and a lot of time at sea. All we do is stay out offshore at least Monday through Friday, and we would refuel the other Navy ships.
Wow, you're just a floating gas station.
Exactly, floating gas station.
Oh my God. How did that assignment come about?
I'm not really sure. I spent that time on the Ranger, and I was ready. I wanted to go ashore.
Yeah.
And the Navy, get a little shore duty and relax. And the Navy said, nope, we got other plans for you.
Oh my God.
We're going to send you back to sea on this oil tanker. And you didn't have much of a choice, quite honestly. It was
right.
You just salute and you say, okay, that's my next assignment. There I go.
But it doesn't sound like a common assignment. You're not going to run into a bunch of those guys, right?
Yeah, it was very unusual in that I was the only naval officer on the ship, and it was a very unusual assignment. I didn't report very much to a senior naval officer, but again, spent a whole lot of time on the bridge of the ship Kawishiwi, communicating with other naval ships via radio and other things. So I look back on that tour, although, again, it was pretty demanding. As a matter of fact, for enlisted personnel, being on those oil tankers was considered arduous sea duty, in that we were at sea a minimum of 5 days a week, and oftentimes during exercises, offshore and going out to Hawaii and other locales, we would spend many weeks straight at sea just refueling Navy ships.
Jeez. Not a whole lot of time to meet somebody and start a family, huh?
That's true. So yeah, consequently, my social life was essentially non-existent. I didn't, meet. People ask me, how come you didn't get married, Lem? What's the problem? And I said, well, actually, I'd tell the women, and they like this line. I'd say, oh, that's because the sea was my mistress.
Ah, yes.
And they, that's kind of a classic line. I understand. And I'd say that's because I spent all my time out at sea. That's why I'm still unmarried.
There, I just looked it up. USNS Kawishiwi. Yep, there it is. Huh.
Yeah, it was a neat ship, and good for you. But again, for your Navy listeners, they'll all say, "Oh yeah, we took on fuel from Kawishiwi. I know what you're talking about."
Oh man, that's pretty neat. So a successful tour, I assume.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, you sound is that a little reservation there? Or?
Well, heavy sigh. I'll tell you what. I'm doing these flashbacks down memory lane, and this is wonderful, Marty. I tell you what. Again, it's refreshing a lot of my memories, and it was a tiring, not an easy time in my life, but I hung in there.
Where'd you go after that then?
So I talked to my, I don't know, detailer, they call them in the Navy. And it's kind of like, I said, hey, I spent 5+ years out at sea. It's time to, get a little shore duty. I'm easy. Just give me some neat shore duty anywhere on the Pacific coast or maybe the Caribbean. I'm easy.
Oh, sure.
And they said, oh, well, you're single, Lem, and we got a special good deal for you. We're going to send you to Japan.
Huh?
And I said, wait a second. They don't even, I spent 5 years on demanding sea duty. All I want is somewhere, along the west coast of the United States. You can do that for me. And they said, nah, you're single. You don't have any dependents. We're going to give you shore duty, Lem, in Yokosuka, Japan.
Oh, jeez. Well, you got half of what you wanted, I suppose.
Yeah, I did actually. So here's the irony is I was a very unhappy camper in that, man, I didn't want to go to Japan, the culture shock, and I wanted to meet some women. Actually, That was one of the downsides. It's like, oh my God, how am I ever going to meet anyone if my next assignment's in Japan?
Sure.
I spent 2 years ashore at a Navy command, again at the large Navy base. It's called Yokosuka, Japan, doing mainly ship repair.
Oh.
And ironically, I really I look back on that tour with some satisfaction. It turned out to be very interesting, and actually there were female naval officers in the BOQ, and so I had a tiny social life.
My first assignment was to Fort Polk, Louisiana, and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be the worst. And that turned out to be one of the most fun, because there's something about being in a place that's not the greatest, but you're all in that place. It's not the greatest. And so it seemed like that was the location that I got my closest buddies, because we were kind of all suffering the same, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. No, it's a bonding experience. And, like typhoons, we'd have typhoons party. Actually, the BOQ that I lived in was built by the Japanese military before World War II.
Jeez.
And it was this rickety old building, it was terrible. However, we were all in the same situation, including the female officers. And, so we could bond over that.
That always makes time go by a little bit faster, a little bit easier.
Yeah.
Well, you've already fulfilled your commitment. So,
right? That's right. So I never, quite honestly, Marty, I never intended to stick around for 20 years. So I was more than getting a little burnout. And it's like, hey, I wouldn't, when I joined the Navy, it was not with the intention of sticking around for 20 years. And, I paid my dues, and I can resign. And, but actually the Navy, I'll keep moving along here. The Navy did dangle a bit of a carrot for my final active duty assignment. They said, okay, Lem, you paid your dues in all these strange places. Now we're going to give you some shore duty finally, which actually I'm surprised they didn't send me back to sea, which is the standard rotation. But They said, oh, we'll send you to shore duty in San Diego.
There you go.
So I said, okay, I'll stick around then.
You're not quite at 10 years yet, though, right?
That was just about the 10-year point. And I'll tell you, that's when it gets difficult, Marty.
Yeah.
You will know. It's kind of like, man, I got 10 years under the belt. Do I want to stick around for 20? Can I stick around for 20?
Yeah.
So that is kind of, you're right on the cusp of deciding whether to, make it a full 20-year career because you've got so much time invested.
Sure. So how many years were you back at San Diego?
So I was there for my final 2 years, and again, that was kind of like that was kind of my final good assignment on active duty. And it was after that point that I said, nah, I'm ready to get out of the Navy. However, I made a smart decision. It was probably one of the smartest ones I've made in my life, Marty, and I've made plenty of mistakes. But I switched over to the reserves and consequently started at that point, right after active duty, to get a number of fascinating Navy reserve positions. So that was the blessing, in that I didn't lose the credit for my active duty time, but could roll that into eventually retiring out of the reserves.
Did you go traditional reserve, or did you go active guard reserve?
No, I did the drill the weekend and the 2 weeks a year. And those were some interesting assignments. And I got to admit, that was a whole lot different. And I did enjoy those kind of weird, reserve assignments and 2 weeks active duty. So that time pretty much flew by. And, I would get promoted at the right milestones. And so I hung around and made it as a reservist.
So you retired in 2004 as a reservist.
That is correct. Yeah. So between my active duty time and then my reserve time, actually I had a lot of years in, a lot of points.
Yeah.
In hindsight, I didn't rack up as many as they do nowadays. Paid my dues as a reservist. As a matter of fact, I will segue almost the very last reserve assignment I had. I got mobilized on very short notice, going back some 20 years. For you remember that Operation Iraqi Freedom, right?
Of course, sure.
Of course. So I got called up on very short notice. It's like, yep, get your sea bag. Show up with your sea bag, get ready to deploy. We're going to war. Now, this was not Desert Storm, but rather it was when we, out of Kuwait, we invaded Iraq in Operation Iraqi Freedom.
Oh, so you're talking, that was 2003?
Yeah, it was about 2003. It was Operation Iraqi OIF.
OIF. Yeah, OIF. Yeah. Not enduring freedom. It was Iraqi freedom.
Well, so that kind of rolled into the initial invasion out of Kuwait up into Iraq. Only lasted a couple weeks. The very beginning of it, which I got called up and was in Kuwait on land. Yeah, so I was on land, and it's like, we stand by. When are we going to invade, out of Kuwait? When are we going to roll the tanks north? And actually, there was a huge sandstorm. I don't know if you recall that.
I remember that. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but it was about, I forget, maybe what was it, about 3 weeks of fighting when essentially Saddam Hussein was overthrown. And that's when Operation Iraqi Freedom rolled into enduring freedom.
What was your job that they deployed you over to Kuwait?
Yeah, so that was kind of my last active duty. Well, it was my last active duty, definitely. And it was kind of my last reserve assignment. It started out as harbor defense, but then became what they call naval coastal warfare. And the responsibility of naval coastal warfare was to protect the port in Kuwait, and also to capture the offshore oil platforms, the GO-plats, they would call them, GO-plats. So we were right along the shoreline of Kuwait in Iraq.
Jeez, that's crazy.
It was interesting.
What rank were you then?
Gosh, I was fairly senior at that point. I was what they call a commander. What's that? 05. So I was a fairly senior officer in, again, naval coastal warfare, which was about both men and women. It was about 1,000 personnel command. And again, we were right along the coastline of Kuwait and Iraq. And it was about 1,000 person command. And I was one of the more senior people in that command.
Wow, that's impressive.
Yeah, thanks.
That's pretty cool. Yeah. How long did they keep you over there for?
9 months. So it was, I know, it was pretty hot and dusty. So we got mobilized just about Christmas time as they were starting to man up on the ground over there. And they sent us over there for the invasion. And then we stuck around until September of when again, that was when the Enduring Freedom officially kicked off.
It's remarkable how, they'll get you over there as fast as they can. You have the action, and then there's that long tail afterwards before they let you go back home, right?
That's true. Everyone was very anxious. We were counting the days and hours. Like, when are they going to send us back home? Now we were successful. I'm ready to go back home, and that did drag out. But we were all exhausted. No alcohol, and trying to think. We lived in tents. It was when we first got over there. There was zero accommodations. We literally. Actually, they put up tents the first week or two while we were there, and we literally made all our own furniture out of packing crates.
Did you really?
Yeah. We made our desks and tables and everything out of wooden packing crates. But as time went on, we used to go up to Kuwait City and buy furniture, and so by the time our personnel I left. They were pretty much back on track. But again, the war, as you well remember, dragged on for many years, and it was a sad time.
Was there a chance? I know reserves kind of top out, right? I mean, I know it's really hard to go past the reserves, but you were already an 05.
Yep.
Was there a chance that you looked at 06?
I don't know what my promotion chances were. I never really was that gung ho.
Okay.
I don't know. Maybe I'm rationalizing. Yeah, I think that's the problem, Marty. And you can tell me your senior rank, but I topped out as a commander. I'm sure I went before the selection board. I did. I got passed over for captain, which is the equivalent of a colonel. Right. And you look back and said, woulda, coulda, shoulda. And if I had applied myself, or if I'd gone, if I tried a little bit harder, or I'd done above and beyond, but no, I never got selected. And so again, I thought, as a matter of fact, that seems to be the default here at SSC, the Space Systems Command. Is like, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. We have a few retired colonels, but usually seems like folks seem to top out at about the lieutenant colonel point.
Well, at that point, after that, I mean, one, it's even fewer and far between in the reserves to try to get an 06 slot. But then you're taking on a whole lot more duties that would require a lot more time dedicated to a reserve job.
Yeah.
And that may not be palatable,
Boy, I tell you what, Marty, I don't know if it's your other interviews, but boy, you put your finger right on it. And to become a full captain in the reserves or active duty is a very demanding select. The pyramid really starts narrowing down.
Sure.
I have no regrets. I get my, Uncle Sam sends me at the beginning of the month, every month. They send me a nice little thank you. We have a lot of benefits as a retired reservist.
What was your biggest ass chewing you ever got in the Navy?
Boy, I'll tell you what. One that pops into my head. I was on the bridge of the aircraft carrier, and we were steaming in formation, as they say, and that can be a dangerous time on aircraft carriers. Interestingly enough, and it still rubs me the wrong way, the commanding officer on an aircraft carrier is a naval aviator.
Oh.
They're very good. They're very senior, and they know what they do. They're good at ship driving, as we say, and somehow or other, maybe I've intentionally kind of subconsciously tried to forget it. Somehow or another ship got pretty darn close to us, closer than it should have.
Yeah.
And the captain, the commanding officer, a wonderful man who I've seen him on TV and stuff.
Oh, wow.
He was a great guy. He came out on the bridge of the ship. And when he saw that this other Navy combatant surface ship was closer than it should have been to us, Marty, he wrapped his arm around my head and put me in a headlock. Yeah, he grabbed my head, and he's a senior captain, and he literally wrapped his arm around my head, put me in a headlock and held me next to his chest and said, "If you ever do that again, God help you. You should have called me. It doesn't matter if it was the middle of the night. The standing orders are, notify the captain anytime a ship gets in within 2,000 yards of the ship. And you didn't do that. And, he physically did that to me. But that was kind of, actually, I'll tell you what, some of those, he was an aviator himself. And that sticks in my mind. A great, he looked out, actually, he helped my career.
Yeah.
But that was one instance, that was an feeling I won't forget.
What, you had to be just like, oh my God, I can't believe it.
Well, it's stuck in my mind. That was,
Sure.
So ever since then, it's like, don't hesitate to call the commanding officer anytime, another ship's going to get within a nautical mile.
Wow. Never heard that one before. So now in contrast, what would you say your proudest moment is?
Wow. I'll tell you what, they kind of run together, Marty. I'm going to have to reflect on that one. I guess, when I qualified actually on the aircraft carrier, it was very difficult for a junior officer to get all his qualifications signed off. And to become a officer of the deck on an aircraft carrier, because the other senior officers didn't trust junior officers,
of course,
as my story illustrated, to keep us out of trouble. They were reluctant to qualify junior surface warfare officers to become officers of the deck, where they would go back in their stateroom and you were up there all on your own, kind of responsible as the captain's representative on the bridge. So, and actually you get what they call a warfare device. You know how the aviators have their gold wings on their breast device, right?
I do. Yeah.
So believe it or not, and I don't know if it's what they call a Me Too pin. We got so many of them in the Navy now, but so the surface warfare officers, we do have a gold pin breast device that we wear when we qualify. And I'll tell you, Marty, it was a long, hard qualification, but I did earn my surface warfare officer pin device that I'm still very proud of to this day on my first tour.
That's amazing. I mean, I understand the reluctance for them to do it, so they're going to be very rigorous that you know what you're doing. And
they're afraid. Yeah, they're afraid of collisions at sea, which is a very real. That's a real thing. And actually, I won't digress because you've been so generous. But while I was on the aircraft carrier Ranger, we had an extremely serious collision at sea that did a whole lot of damage to the ship. And that's kind of the worst case scenario.
For that happened to your ship or another ship?
No, it happened while I was on the aircraft carrier Ranger.
Oh, it happened to the Ranger.
Our ship, the Ranger, in a very congested area during a transit, we T-boned, ran right into an oil tanker and crushed the bow. We had it really damaged the front of the ship. And of course, the captain was relieved and the navigator was relieved. And so that was an extremely sobering, sad event in the history of my 3-year tour on board the Ranger.
How did that come about?
It was a congested time. It was what they called the running lights. So it was we were going through what they called the Straits of Malacca, which is a very narrow, tight. It's when one leaves the Pacific Ocean just south of Singapore, and you go through the Straits of Malacca, which are a very narrow, congested shipping lane. The senior naval officers were not on the bridge at the time, and people on the bridge got confused. The merchant oil tanker got confused when it looked at us and couldn't figure out what course and heading we were on. Actually, even for an aircraft carrier, the burden was kind of on us to avoid.
Yeah.
We do not, the merchant tankers, they're minimally manned, and it's up to the aircraft carrier to avoid shipping, which we did not do. It was a sad, unfortunate thing. We literally punched a triangular cutout into the side of the oil tanker. It was a huge, horrendous thing. We had to turn around. We were going to the Indian Ocean, and we had to turn around from the Straits of Hormuz. We had to steam back first to Subic Bay. And then we got put into dry dock in Yokosuka, where they cut out the bow of the aircraft carrier. We were put into dry dock in Yokosuka. The Japanese shipyard workers literally cut off the bow of our aircraft carrier, which was smashed in, built a brand new bow of the ship, and then welded it and put it back on the carrier.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. Sad.
Retired Naval Commander Lem Shepherd, it's been a pleasure to talk with you today. Thanks for giving me your story.
Well, thank you, Marty. I'll tell you what, this has been so enjoyable, and I just hope your listeners enjoy it too.
Everybody loves a Navy man. Thanks again, Lem. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.
On behalf of Commander Shepherd, I'd like to thank you for listening today. I hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please leave a like and a comment and share the podcast with someone else. And as always, make sure to download the next episode for more service origin stories. So until next time, on your feet, dismiss!